different story.
Executive
Yeah,
session,
different
go
story.
into budget.
Yeah.
So moved. Second, whatever.
Whatever.
What's usual?
Whatever.
That's
Okay, 2021 budget. It's that time of year again. Let's just dive right into it here. Here's our budget process, just as a reminder. In August this year, we asked department heads to start inputting the request. We bumped this back a month. Typically, we start in July, but there was so much uncertainty this summer, and there is still so much uncertainty, that we bumped the whole process back a month. In August and September, Eric and I met with department heads. Last month, you guys discussed some preliminary budget issues. We discussed the capital budget. We discussed personnel requests. And we discussed some of the big issues like health insurance and fund balance. On October 20th, that's today, we've got our budget workshop. And then the tentative budget, the actual budget document, will be delivered to the board by me, the budget manager, on November 2nd. On November 19th, we'll have our budget hearing. After the 19th, the budget can be adopted at any time. So once the budget's handed off to the board on November 2nd, you guys can make any changes that you want to it. A budget workshop, the point of what we're doing today is just a preview of what we have so far on the tentative budget. It's an opportunity for questions and input from the board. And disclaimer, this year is going to be particularly tough. Nobody knows what's going to happen with the economy. Nobody knows what's going to happen in Albany. Nobody knows what's going to happen in Washington. There's a lot of things that are up in the air. So this is our best conservative guess about how we think things are going to go next year. And there is room for board input at the end. So I do want a couple items to discuss. So, fiscal targets, we established these in 2015. I put an asterisk on that because I do believe that our Finance and Rules Committee needs to relook at these and set new fiscal targets. It's been 6 years. I think it's time to take another look and see what makes sense. Maintain 13 million fund balance, or 10% of county and hospital operations. The reason we picked 13 million is because our total budget between the county and the hospital is about $135 million. So 10% will be 13 million. Second target is maintain the county's AA credit rating, which we have maintained with ease and will continue to maintain. Yes, Dick?
I thought with the hospital balance and what they had, they were going to maintain a fund balance separate.
And they do. Yep. So
we're still maintaining 13 million?
13 million I would call a combined fund balance between, it has to be a minimum of 13 between us and the hospital. So the hospital, I'm going to go through fund balances in a minute, but they've got about 35 million right now, and we've got about 16 million. So we're well above the targets.
That was my point, I guess.
Yeah. It's a pretty easy target for us to hit.
Okay.
If we just wanted to keep a 10% fund balance of our own budget, we'd only need $5 million.
Those were the numbers I thought I did earlier.
Yep. Credit rating, that's easy, and maintain current county service levels. Here's where we stand today. If I would have shown you this last year at this exact time, in fact, we did this on the 9th last year of October, our general fund account was at 8 million. Today it stands at 16 million. So what happened? We, in March, pulled back a lot of our operations, a lot of our funding, and things that we were going to do this year because we didn't know what was going to happen with sales tax, we didn't know what was going to happen with state aid, and we didn't know how long COVID was going to shut us down. So we made some decisions that this board was aware of. We talked a lot about it during March and April to pull back some things, and it turns out our sales tax came in okay. And it turns out the state has cut, but they haven't cut quite as deep yet. And so as we look towards the end of next year, we're going to have quite a bit of savings from the 2020 budget that will roll over into fund balance. So we're going into 2021 in a really good financial position, probably better than we've been in quite some time. County road budget fund balance is always about where it is. Money comes in county road, money comes out. It always maintains a little bit of a fund balance. Same with machinery. Solid waste fund balance is up over $1 million. That's good because we're about to spend some serious cash next year out of solid waste. Hospital continues to do well. In fact, this number is a bit dated because Eric and I went to the Finance Committee last night and they're up to about $35 million cash on hand. So they're doing quite well.
And Ryan, if you don't mind me noting also, that their financials reflect a different fund balance than we do. What we have in our system is really much more of a cash fund balance, and theirs is their full financial assets and liabilities. So don't try and compare that to what you might see from their financial statements.
Either way, it's quite similar. They're going to be close to the same. Workers' compensation fund doing well, 2.5 million. Health insurance fund doing incredibly well at 7.3 million. We'll talk more about that later. Capital fund over $2 million, which is good because we've got some plans to spend some of that. Budget summary, this is really where the rubber meets the road. Money in, okay, or excuse me, money out. This is what we're planning to spend. You'll see last year we spent about $50 million. This year we're going to spend $50.7 million, an increase of 1.45%, modest year-over-year increase, about $700,000. Total revenue, last year $31 million, this year $31 million. We're down about $39,000. We'll get into some of the reasons why, but basically that there is going to be the fact that we are cutting across the board state revenue. So, and we're holding our anticipated revenue from things like the county clerk and things like Eric's office and sales tax the same. So usually we let our revenue creep up a little bit just with inflation alone, you know, we go up a little bit. This year we're kind of holding everything flat and some things are cutting. Balance to be raised by taxes, that leaves $19 million that needs to be raised by property taxes. We take out fund balance, which we've used every year, about $1.6 million. That leaves a levy of $17.79 million. And our taxable value, that's every property in Lewis County, what's it's worth. So what you do is you take your levy, divide it by your value, multiply by 1,000, and you get your rate. So initially, and we're going to discuss this, but initially the budget that we put together calls for a 1.38% tax increase on the property taxes in Lewis County. But we've got a lot more to discuss on that at the end. Please interrupt with any questions as we go.
Form?
Excuse me?
Give this in paper form?
Yes. I don't have it right now.
It would have been nice to have.
Well,
Scribble on it.
this is 90, this presentation is 90 slides, so I didn't want to print it all out, but I can email it to you guys, if that's okay.
I'd rather have it in paper.
Okay. Well, we'll print it and put it in your mailboxes. Yep. State mandates, as usual, state mandates make up a large portion of the county tax levy. It's about 70%. Typically, it's around 80%, and the difference this year is the IGT. The IGT is only $3 million, only. Usually, it's $3.7 to $4 million. So if you were to add that additional $750,000 to $1 million, you'd get back up to 80% mandates. So that's the difference this year, is our mandates are a little bit less. The reason that the IGT is less is that just like in 2018, we got whacked by the state because we had underpaid for a few years and we had to pay more. Well, now the state's saying that we overpaid for a few years and we have to pay less. So it all balances out in the long run to be about the same. But for next year, we know we have to pay a little less than $3 million. Full taxable value, look at how our property values have grown. Pretty good. We're up over almost to $2.5 million or $1 billion in total taxable value, which is a good thing. Property tax levy, this is what we've raised in property taxes over the last 10 years, going back 10 years. So, that's pretty standard across, I think, New York State government's pretty steady growth. The good thing is our property values have grown as well. What about our assessed value? The rate per thousand, so basically our tax rate. What I like about this is if you go back to 2014, we've been very, very steady. And actually, we dropped off, 2010, 987, but if you had those on there, they would show that the rate has been about the same. These 3 years were a bit of a anomaly where they were that low because some of our larger towns did revals in those years. But for the most part, we've held very consistent with our taxpayers. I think this is a very fair picture for our taxpayers. They can't, they don't look at the county and expect their taxes are going to go wildly up one year, drop the next, up again, drop. It's pretty consistent, which I think is good. Sales tax collection, obviously it's a big part of our revenue. You can see here we budgeted this year $11.8 million. In 2021 we're going to budget $11.85 million again. Year to date we've received $9.8 million. Eric and I are confident that we will actually hit our budget target in 2020, which would make us one of maybe 3 or 4 counties in the state that hits their target in 2020. So that's a good thing. Joe?
Ryan, is that through October or is that September?
That's through October 13th. Yeah.
Both bars or just the blue bar? I
The
assume just
blue bar is collected, orange is budgeted.
Well, the budgeted, that's for the whole year, not.
That's
okay.
correct. Yep. So year to date, we're here. Projected, who can project sales tax? But I think it's pretty okay. Phil, what's your? Where are we gonna? Where are we gonna head?
We're gonna be $1 million over.
$1 million over, right there, baby.
Put
Get
some
Perfect.
that on the record.
Get that on the record. All right.
You holding the
So.
pot on
Yeah.
He's spending as fast as he can.
It's gone and we haven't even received it yet. You can see our budgeted amount. We've increased sales tax pretty consistently. This has gone from $9 million all the way up to $11.8. We're not going to increase it next year. I don't think it's responsible to say that we think we're going to receive more in 2021 than we received in 2020. We might see less. I think holding it at 11.85 is probably conservative enough. I think it's safe. So, notes on sales tax, no budget increase. We talked about that. We covered that. Our most volatile revenue source. Everybody knows that, But this is a good note. Well, a bad note, but we need to make sure we talk about it. New York State continues to divert local sales tax. This is a new trend. Starting in 2019, the state has made budget moves at our local portion of the sales tax. They diverted the AIM in 2020 for the first time. Next year that's going to be $185,000. So before we even receive it, the state's taken out the AIM payments that now go to towns and villages. And then a new one in 2021, the fiscally distressed health facilities diversion. That's money that would have gone to Lewis County General Hospital from the state. Now it's going to come from us. So this is not cash in, cash out that we have to pay. It's money that they skim off the top, and then before they even send us our sales tax back, they're taking it off the top. So this is a new, diversion from the state.
You should get credit for IGT.
Yeah.
That would, you know what? Maybe we should take that off the top. We got to keep an eye on that. If you ask NISAC, they're very concerned about this. If every year it's $100 grand, $100 grand, $100 grand, this used to be the county's sacred cow. We got our 4%, they got their 4%, and that was it. Not anymore. General assumptions for the 2021 budget: health insurance premiums will not increase. We talked about that. We'll do a 1-month holiday that will take place in, I think, January or February. Where we won't pay anything. The employees won't pay anything either. It'll just be a free holiday. Employee compensation will be tied to the outcome of CSEA negotiations, so we put in zeros across the board for everybody. Obviously, we've got money for when negotiations end, but we're not going to budget for 2%, because if we do, we walk into negotiations, they're going to say, well, you already did 2%. What difference does it make? Well, it does make a difference. So, we hold that back in negotiation years. State revenue sources will be cut 20% across the board. We've talked about that. And we're not counting on any federal stimulus funding. So I've seen some counties are throwing in a little bit of cash figure, assuming that they're going to get something from the feds. We're not going to assume anything. If we get it, great. If we don't, we don't. Health insurance fund balance. This chart we've seen, but if you look at about where, 2017, we're at $1 million. We're already up. Actually, this doesn't reflect the most recent data. We're up over $7 million now. So pretty steep increase, which is why no premium increase next year and the holiday. Public safety, we're gonna go department by department, try to hit everybody, and then we've got some discussion items at the end. District Attorney highlights revenue remaining at $15,000 for the traffic diversion program. I know this has been an issue that we've discussed a lot. The District Attorney is now prosecuting traffic tickets. She's just using the diversion program as a reduction program. So it's not diversion or it's not traffic diversion or nothing. It's you do the program, you get a reduction. So
Right.
the town should be getting some revenue. We should be getting some revenue.
So what do you define reduction? What are you talking about specifically?
Depends on what you did. If you went 70 and a 55 and you go on and take
Okay, that
this,
works.
if you go 70 and 55, you go online, take the course, you send a little bit of
Okay,
money,
I
a
got
little
it.
bit of revenue to us, she'll decide what the reduction is.
This is what Jefferson County does. The issue was, I think, they were taking the course and then dismissing the ticket,
Dismissed.
right?
Right.
So then the towns weren't getting any revenue. So this way, it is basically a plea bargain, and
Yes.
you take the course and we'll plead to a non-moving violation, right?
Yes.
Or something like that.
So we get some revenue, the towns get some revenue, and theoretically, you know, there's less prosecution work happening for the district attorney.
There's more unsafe drivers on the road.
Well, that's the,
Well, technically, by taking the course, they're supposed to learn from that.
You see this 3 times 2.45 earlier in the paper last
yes,
week?
yeah,
We are, the county
yeah,
is.
per a pop, $25 a
How's
pop.
everything
So
up there
that's
with the
staying in the
railroad
town
tracks?
budget?
Still, you guys still making some
Why?
money?
Where do you want it to go?
Town is,
Substantial loss.
They're still getting the fees for the ticket.
not all of them,
Yeah,
when she dismisses them.
she's not doing that anymore. So
We'll change their mind.
probably you guys
You?
would be my guess.
And local judges too.
Yeah. Personnel and benefits decreasing a total of $14,000. They've had some personnel changes up there. Coroner increasing due to higher activity and costs. We've gone through this all this year. More autopsies, more medical investigations. I'd rather put an amount in there that's safe rather than have to come, you know, dipping back into the pot every 6 months. So that's what we're trying to do. Request increased stipend pay of $5,000 for ADAs for on-call hours and off-hour arrangements. This is pretty standard across New York State. District attorneys have to now, because it's counsel on first appearance. The DAs are also getting up into the middle of the night. Our defense, Lewis Defenders pays their people to get up in the middle of the night. We haven't been paying ours. They want to make it even, and so we're putting in $10,000, $5,000 for each ADA. Leanne will not get paid extra to do this, but they're going to rotate the night calls, and we haven't decided yet whether they're going to get paid per call or a stipend or what, but we're putting extra money in the budget so that we can handle it.
I think,
I'm good if it's a non-call thing where they actually get called, not just a stipend on there.
Okay. This is just, our goal is just to set some money aside and then have the discussion after, because we still got a couple months till 2021.
Ryan, when I think of on-call, I think of the old days where you were sitting home waiting to get something done. With the advent of cell phones and everything else we got for technology right now, I don't think it's as much on-call as it used to be.
Well, can I just say, what it is, Dick, is that they have to be available. You're right, they're gonna get the call by the cell phone, but they're supposed to actually go and appear at the court where somebody is gonna be arraigned when they're brought in.
But
So
I've
they,
listened to some of these with some lawyer friends of mine, and they're on their cell phone handling the whole court thing. They're not in a court or anything. They're sitting wherever they get out of my house.
yeah.
The prosecution, in Lewis County, the prosecution is, we've set it up so that they have to be on Zoom. They have to be in some way face-to-face. At least that's what I've been told. The defense can call in.
Right, that's what, that's
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
but we've tried to make things face-to-face, especially, well, the only reason we're doing night arraignments is for felons, so it's not like it's that often.
Right.
But say we've got 3 ADAs and we got to cover 24/7, 365, somebody has to be on at all times. And I agree, I don't think we just, give them money to be on. I think it's got to be an amount per call. But if it's your month, you got the month of August, that's how Leanne wants to do it. Just everybody rotate a month. If you're on the month of August or the month of July, and it doesn't matter if it's July 4th, if there's a felony arrest, somebody's got to, show up for that.
They do it on their cell phone?
They have, yeah, they
The
can.
defense does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But how many ADAs are we talking about, 2 or 3?
Two.
Two. So,
Two
okay,
ADAs.
so that's 2,500 apiece, it's probably not that big a deal.
Well,
You said it was 5,000.
I've got 10,000. Yeah.
Where does it say?
5,000 for 80, I'm sorry. Well, what it should say is 5,000
So it's
for
10,000.
each. Yes, 10,000 total.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the administration of how this is gonna work is not ironed out yet, but we want to put that money in the budget because, it's something that Leanne asked for, and I do think it's fair if we're asking these people to cover that.
Are they doing the arraignments by Zoom just because of the lockdown, or is that a permanent thing, or have they done it in the past?
Because of the lockdown.
Do you know if they're gonna continue to do that?
I
Oh, they
hope
were
so.
doing it before, I think.
They were?
I think so.
Okay. The arraignments were actually done, okay.
If you all don't mind, Ryan's got about 25 departments to
Oh,
go through. This is intended to be budget. These are operational kind of things, but
Well, if they
Well,
ask questions.
maybe we need a little
sure it
time.
is.
Okay, district attorney total, this year, 571. Now, when I talk about these total costs, I'm talking about what goes onto the levy. So, if you take expenses minus revenue, what goes onto the levy? This is not the total cost to operate the DA's office. This is the total cost to the taxpayers to operate the DA's office. 589 last year, 571 this year requested. We actually knocked it down to 566 in what I'm going to put as the tentative budget. That's a reduction of about 4% for the district attorney's office.
But you always come back for more money.
Well, we're going to talk about the coroner in a second here. We did up the coroner's budget a little bit so that we don't have that issue again this year of, I agree with Leanne. We can't possibly predict how many autopsies, suspicious unattended deaths we're going to have.
And we don't want to lose Livingstone either.
Right, which would put us in a
That'd
really
be
bad
huge,
spot. Yes.
huge loss.
Yeah. So we did bump that up a little bit so that we don't have to, constantly go back to the well to look at those things. Public defender, this is a contracted item with Lewis Defenders. Cost this year, same as the cost last year, no change. You will note though that the state is now subsidizing defense in Lewis County at a tune of $422,000 additional dollars from the Harrell Hastings settlement. So their budget has pretty much doubled over the last 5 years for defense in Lewis County. Sheriff's Office, Road Patrol and Dispatch. Highlights, benefits increased $10,000. We had some personnel changes, some more people took health insurance. Personnel decreased 4.5%, increases 4.5%. We are adding 50,000 in there to make sure that every single part-time employee is fully budgeted. So if we tell the sheriff we're giving them 6 part-time dispatchers, we can't then only budget for 4.5 part-time dispatchers to get hours. If we're gonna tell him he's got 6, you gotta budget 6. So that's what we're trying to do to keep that in line. Requests, the sheriff requests for the vehicle fleet to increase by 4 vehicles. That is not included in the draft budget. I think the sheriff may come to the board and request that be amended by you guys, but in my budget, I'm not gonna put it in.
How did he justify that?
It's part of a plan to allow every deputy to have their own vehicle. New line
I
items.
think we need to discuss that sometime.
Yep. New line items, employee recruitment and retention. We are now taking more time to give employees background checks. We're putting employees through polygraph tests. So it's a new line item for the purpose of screening employees, making sure we're getting good candidates. And then a new line item of drug task force, which the sheriff asked for $5,000. So a total of $10,000 requested increase for the sheriff's discretionary spending, and I did put those in the budget. So
What's the dollar impact of those 4 vehicles?
it would be just the cost. We already own them. So what he was asking to do was, as we transition to enterprise, he's getting 6 new vehicles. We would traditionally take 6 off the fleet. What he's saying is 6 new, keep 4. So it would be just the cost of insurance, maintenance, fuel for those
But
vehicles.
they're older vehicles, so the maintenance probably gonna be
Right.
a hell of a lot better than it was.
Yeah, but it's not like he requested for us to buy 4 more cars. It's just 4 that we had that he wanted
There's
to
still a
keep.
cost there. that we should-
Sure.
Would
Yeah.
they be sold though, those 4 cars?
If
or?
my plan would be they get 6 and we sell 6.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So we're losing the revenue from selling them too.
Yes, that's
Okay.
another loss. Yep.
Well, and the other thing is, if you keep the 4 and don't turn them back, that means you gotta buy 4 more sets of equipment for the new cars, which that's
Right.
Oh, yeah.
$10,000 or $20,000 a car.
Most of the new cars that we get, we're outfitting with new equipment anyways. We're not transitioning a lot of the old stuff into the new vehicles, but we can sell the equipment for aftermarket value too. Jerry?
Dispatchers,
Yes.
we got money that pays their salaries in some of the grants. How much are we using that?
We're using part of it. Maybe Eric could answer that.
I believe we use, Jerry, I don't know exactly, I believe we use about $60,000 from grants to supplement dispatch salaries.
Okay, but there's more in there. What are we using the rest for? Is that like it's kind of like a slush fund, so you could probably take more out of there for dispatchers.
We are,
County.
I believe we're limited on what percentage can be used for personnel.
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert on this yet, Jerry, but I think it comes from the E911 funding, which has been increasing. I think it's at maybe 90,000 per year, so we're using a good portion of that, I believe.
Okay.
What's the $5,000 for the drug task force? What's he using that? Doesn't seem like very much money for.
Operations. The rest they fund pretty much based on like things they did today. We allocated money from forfeiture for their operations. So they use their forfeiture money to support operations. This would be say they go a year or 7-8 months without bringing in any forfeiture revenue. At least we would have a stable source for them to continue operations. Kind of. Sheriff Rec Patrol, this SRO is again 2 SROs, one at Harrisville, one at South Louis. Again, their off-season will be budgeted under Rec Patrol. So same thing we did this year. Planning on maximum reimbursement of state recreation programs. We do this every year. Maximum we can get from Snowmobile is $37,500. Maximum naval is 10. ATV is 10 that we reimburse from the Lewis County Trail Fund. Requests 2 snowmobiles, a 2005 and a 2008, for a total cost of $20,000. We did talk about that last month in the capital budget, and it will be in the tentative budget in a couple weeks.
How many snowmobiles will that give you?
I
4.
believe 4.
Four.
Yeah. And then Jackie's department has 2. So. Sheriff's non-jail. So this is dispatch, recreation, road patrol, everything non-jail. Total budgeted last year, $3.2 million. Total budgeted this year, $3.35.
It says requested.
Yep, I'm sorry, requested and what's in the draft budget is the same. So we're basically granting the request except for the vehicles, which wouldn't be budgeted here, they'd be budgeted in enterprise anyway. Year-over-year change of 3.9%. Sheriff's Office Jail highlights, boarding revenue decreased from $35,000 to $10,000. What's amazing about this line item, that's a typo, it should be $82,500, excuse me. But oh no, that is correct, I'm sorry. In 2020, we've only received $8,200 in boarding revenue. If you go back just to 2018, we used to budget $65,000 for other people, other counties, or Fort Drum Federal housing inmates with us. Now, we only are going to budget $10,000 this year, and we might not even, hit $10,000.
Is that because of bail reform?
Everybody out.
Yes, there's just not the demands. Yeah, there's not the need.
And our neighboring counties also built up some of their jail capacity, so
Yeah.
like Jefferson used to use us a lot, they don't use us that
Yep,
much.
they did build a new, I think, some new
Plus
facilities over
everybody
there.
gets released now.
Right, right.
So I think it's just reasonable that we're not going to get that revenue that we used to get. It's just the new world. Personnel services only up 1% for the year. Law books, we talked about this before, but they're going to an online subscription service, which is slightly more expensive than the hardcover books, but it's better for the inmates and everybody. They can, use the.
So, Ryan, if our revenue is going to decrease that significantly, do we need the same number of correction officers up there?
Yes, and the reason for that is because we don't control the number of correction officers up there. That is done by minimum mandate staffing by the state. So that's controlled by docs. So unfortunately, that's a big NISAC advocacy issue. The state has done a lot on criminal justice reform, but they haven't done anything on allowing counties the flexibility to respond. So it's not so bad for us. We're a relatively small county. Albany County, if you maybe went to NISAC this year, Albany County took a whole wing of their jail, closed it, and turned it into a homeless facility. I mean, you're talking 3 floors of a whole wing completely closed. So they just had no purpose for it, but they still have to have the same number of staff as they had before. So not as much of a problem for us, although, it could become one. Total jail budgeted last year 2.4, this year up slightly, just about $50,000. Total year-over-year change of 2.3% for the jail. Probation, minimal highlights. Personnel and fringe down quite a bit in terms of percentage because we've had employee turnover. We lost Mary Jo, who was with the county for 40 years. So whenever you replace a 40-year employee with a 15-year employee, it's a little bit cheaper. No special requests. We did decrease their state revenue. They only get $20,000, so we bumped it down to 16 to try to be safe. Total cost for probation to the taxpayers is $428,000, a decrease of 5% year over year.
Right.
Yeah.
With the changeover we've got there, are you confident with what you've got there? We don't have Mary Jo there to have the history and stuff. You're pretty confident we funded the right amount there?
Yes, we have a pretty senior staff actually, even though we've had turnover. But Matt's been with the department probably 13, 14 years, and the new person was with DSS before they came over, so they had some knowledge as well. So I think that department does all right. Emergency management. Bob has the easiest budget except for his millions of grants that are hard to follow, but he doesn't ask for much. A year-over-year increase of 0.5% for Bob, so pretty simple. Codes, a little bit of excitement at Codes this year because we are adding Watson and Gregg. That means we get to collect their building permit revenue, so we did increase revenue a little bit. I am hopeful that it's a heck of a lot more than $28,000 we're going to get in more revenue, but we're trying to be conservative, watch it for the first couple of years, see what that number comes out at. We are increasing personnel $49,000 because we're adding a code officer to take on, Watson and Gregg.
Does that include benefits?
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Okay. That would be probably the starting salary, and then benefits I always take 1.4 times 1.4. So. Requests, they did request $8,000 for iPads, so basically when they're on the job they can put the information right in, it goes zip right back to the office. They're already scanning everything in, but what they're doing is doing it, coming to the office, scanning it in, so this will just be easier. So I would like to fund the iPad request in the draft budget. I think it'll be better for them.
How many iPads?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I think that
iPads are only
I think that includes some other
software.
I don't know, Connor, sure. I think that includes some software, some other technology, and even a year's worth of service, maybe for, their.
Yeah.
There's a software subscription that they're going to have that is like an input, template and everything for them. So.
Why would that be
5 code
only
officers.
4?
We're adding another one.
There's 3 now.
Oh, then 4. Yeah, then 4. Yes.
It's a lot of software, eh? Yeah. It's like that game programs on it too?
Yeah, it's got Nintendo.
Probably does. We're looking at that personnel.
If I know anything about our, codes department in Connor, we will get not 1 cent more than what it costs for each iPad and each software. So codes total up quite a bit, obviously, because we're taking on another town. It's not a good business for us to be in. We don't make money when towns give us additional territory to cover. It's a service, but hopefully that permit revenue will be a little bit more than 28,000. Total year-over-year change, 39%. Total cost to the taxpayers to run the codes department is $294,000. Health and Human Services, Community Services, state revenue sources down 20%. Corresponding agency distributions down 20%. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth about this, but more or less what comes in goes out. So we talked to our consultant. We actually have a consultant at CCSI who helps us with accounting and working with state reimbursement. They said, don't budget a cut, put it in full, and it won't affect your budget at all, because if you get 100%, you send out 100%. If you budget 50%, then you only send out 50%. But basically they're saying, put it in full. If you get full, great. If you don't, fine. Either way, it's budget neutral. So they wanted us, and Oasis wants us, to put it in at 100%. My personal opinion is we're not going to get it. But in terms of cost to the taxpayers, it doesn't make a difference, because what comes in goes out. It's net neutral. You get what I'm saying? New line item, agency support. So in light of the fact that we think state revenue is going to be down, we're going to put our own line item in for 25 grand, because we really can't afford to lose some of these services in our community. Pat Freilic's budget carries its own fund balance. She has money from the federal government called Federal Salary Share and a couple other sources that she carries that we never use. She's got actually a little bit of money stored aside that we never use. So we created a line item this year. Well, this is my proposal. We create a line item for 25 grand. That way, if the state really does cut some of these local agencies, we have a little pocket of money where we can step up and say, keep operating in Lewis County. Here's a little bit to get you through. It's not a long-term solution, but it's a little something to help out the agencies in a year where they might be facing significant cuts. So that's the plan. And you can see that our federal salary share and other reserve funds, we're going to add $85,000 to the budget. So we're going to add this new 25 line item, plus we're going to add $60,000 in to supplement her budget this year. So actually total cost to the taxpayers is going to be down quite a bit. So that's money that we've never touched before. It's not a consistent source of revenue, but in a difficult year where we're looking for money and we think the state revenue is not going to be there, it is an appropriate time, I feel, to tap into a little bit of that. So year-over-year change, they're down 53% total cost of the taxpayers. This year, local taxpayers is only $53,000. Did I explain that clearly?
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud. We're keeping state reimbursement at 100% in the budget, even though we think it's going to be 50% or less. And in order to make up for that anticipated cut, we're adding another line item for $25,000. And in order to make up for the anticipated cut to our budget, we're adding $60,000 from Pat's savings account. Public health highlights. This is another one. We can't budget a cut in public health, because if we send our budget to the state and it has 20% reduction, then they're going to take 20% off of that. So we have to budget a full amount, even though we know internally we're not expecting to receive all that. There are some things that have helped us out this year. Our pre-K caseload is just down. We just don't have as many kids going through that program. So even at a 100% budget, that's saving us some money, because that caseload is down. And the flip side, our early intervention caseload is up slightly, which we anticipated, because the state changed the lead standards to a much lower parts per billion lead count in the blood means they have to be case managed. So this is going to continue to go up. It's just going to.
Well, the pre-K is going to be low again in the spring too, because they're not going.
Theoretically, yes.
No, they're not.
Right.
School districts already pretty much said that.
Yeah.
The year is up for them.
Yeah. So caseload can change not just based on COVID, it can also change just based on who walks through the door. So demographically, is a year with a lot of babies or not a lot of babies. That's just, one of those things we have to fluctuate our caseload with what comes in. Total cost of the taxpayer is 1.3 million, pretty consistent, not much of a difference, about 3.5% change year over year. And I think that will end up getting cut in many of those programs. And what will happen is, if the state doesn't send us the revenue, we don't spend. We try to balance it the best we can throughout the year. Department of Social Services, state revenue, we've done the 20% across the board cuts with social services. That accounts to about $413,000 total that we're not going to anticipate. This is one of those where we don't submit if we can anticipate cuts because they don't base our reimbursement based on our budget. They base it on who walks through our door. So Medicaid will stay the same at $5 million. That's because we #keep the cap. We fought for that, and it's a good thing we did because it would have made it even tougher this year. So that stays at $5 million. IGT reduced $750,000 due to overpayments. We talked about that at the beginning, so that's down to $3 million. And in fact, it might be even less next year. So this could be a potential source of even more cushion. So we're thinking it might be even closer to like 2.2 or 2.2 million. So that's another source of a bit of cushion. Second year in a row, a decrease of total cost for the DSS budget on the taxpayers. So even with the reduction in state revenue, the cost would have been, in a normal year, 9.7 million. This year, with the state reductions, it's going to be 10.1 million. Total cost to the taxpayers for this service last year, 10.3. This year, 10.1. A reduction of 2.3. So Jenny continues to do a good job managing that department, keeping the expenses in check as best we can. Office for the Aging, wages and fringes down 8.7%. Remember, net positions, we lost a whole position. We are allowing Tina Stanford to retire without replacing it. That's this year. So we are adopting this program, even though we did part of the shift today. You guys voted on that today, but the rest of it will be adopted in the budget. Staffing realignment, which we discussed. So that's basically the highlights for OFA. We are anticipating reduction in them. So that will cost us a little bit of change. Total cost of the taxpayers, 382 last year, 398 this year, up slightly, but really that's due just to revenue cuts because we cut on our own by reducing personnel, but the state, revenue cuts more than made up for that. So, public services, county clerk, personnel decreased by 5,000 due to attrition. We've had 3 senior employees retire in the last last year. 2 senior employees. Fringe benefits increased by 30,000 because we did add a position this year. Revenue's up $10,000 for increased mortgage activity. That's Jake's, estimate that things are hot. They're going to remain hot, and we've just been processing a lot of mortgages. So remember, the county clerk's office is one that makes us money, so it's not a cost to the taxpayers. It's an offset revenue that comes in. Revenue last year, $124,000. The budget that they submitted was that they would bring in $183. We knocked it down to be a little bit more conservative to $168. What we did is we knocked down DMV. I just don't see DMV being open fully to the public next year, and so it's going to be appointment only, which just means it's going to be a little bit slower. So we just took down that revenue a little bit. But still an overall increase in the clerk's budget that we're projecting. Highway Department, snow and ice agreements. Remember, we renewed those agreements with the towns and villages, or excuse me, just the towns. So 2.9%, that's 32,000. Fringe benefits increased 42,000. 2 employees have opted into our health insurance. There's not much we can do about that. 20% reduction in chips. So we're just not planning on not receiving that money. Capital equipment, we talked about this before, but here's our $200,000 that we've done every year. Here's how it breaks down. When one gets paid off, next year we'll add another one. It kind of just rolls through. Highway projects, we talked about this last month as well. Here's our CHIPS plan over here. So we've got some projects in Osceola, Pinckney, and West Turin. and a big culvert in Harrisburg. In-house, we're working on Mackey Road again, and road striping is always the same, 75 in, 75 out. Bridge design, we'll be spending $73,000 up front to get some bridges ready to rock and roll so that when they do get approved for the Bridge New York program, we can plug and play, ready to go. Total highway projects, $2.4 million next year. Total cost of the highway departments, the local taxpayers, $3.97 last year. Requested 4.08, approved 4.08, change of 2.8% year over year. Solid waste fund, basically we're holding things about the same. In 2022, we should see some operational changes from the investments that we're making, but in 2021, we're going to be doing a lot of construction down there. I don't think it's probably very safe to increase revenues and change a lot of what we expect with our operations, because we're not really going to be finished with the complete overhaul until 2022. Current fund balance sits at $1,076,000, which is very good. Kip did request an additional part-time employee. The reality is our current part-time position has for many years worked more than 30 hours per pay period, which means we're supposed to offer them benefits, and it's not very fair to do that. So if we're going to work somebody 30 hours plus and we want it to stay part-time, then we should have 2 part-timers that each work truly part-time hours. So not a change in expense, but adding in a position so that the hours are being split fairly.
So you're looking at 15 hours each.
When
They
it's
can go up to,
They're working 40 consistently, so we're looking at 20 hours each instead of,
Okay.
Yeah.
The same concept, okay.
yeah, just because we should be offering benefits.
Doesn't that put them the full-time then or benefits?
correct.
If we left it as it was, we could potentially have to give them benefits, but by adding an additional part-timer.
Well, but 20,
No, the threshold's 30 per pay period.
pardon?
The threshold's 30 hours per pay period to give benefits.
Okay.
So
30 hours per week.
I'm,
Yeah, not
okay,
week.
per week, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yep.
30 hours per week, yep, I'm sorry. So my thought is, during busy times, could both of these people work more than 30 hours a week? Yes, they could. But the goal is that over the course of the year, their average hours is below the threshold where we would offer benefits and holidays and all that. So current fund balance, like we've said, revenue in 1.89 million, revenue out, expenditures out 1.89 million. That leaves an end balance of the same as where we started. It's an enterprise fund. What comes in must go out, has to balance itself. The only difference is we're going to be adding a capital cost this year. So when we get to that point, we've got to have more discussion about how to fund that. But they will then, in 2022, have to add a portion of this, to pay it back. So we'll have to keep track of that in the future. If you want to, if we want to borrow it from ourselves, we can do that. There's other ways we can look into to borrow. But the point is, I want everyone to be aware that if we're sitting here next year at this time, they're going to have to cover a portion of that, capital expense to pay back, whatever arrangement we come up with. Recreation, forestry, trails, and parks, trail maintenance, trail permit revenue decrease 167 to 120. So I've talked about this the last 2 years. We put in 167 or 170 or whatever the number is because we have to make it balance. Whatever we sell in permits must be expenses. But the reality is we haven't sold $167,000 of permits ever. We've sold about $120,000 of permits. So let's start budgeting what we actually expect. We expect it to be $120,000, and just recognize that the taxpayers are picking up a portion of this department, which I think is fine. I think it drives a lot of economic activity. It drives a lot of sales tax. So we're going to try to budget an accurate amount in 2021. Harvest revenue stays at 75. We did, and we've been hitting that pretty consistently, actually. Jackie has increased that over the last couple of years. We used to budget maybe 45, 55, now it's up to 75. I think this year they're going to hit above 80, so she's been doing well with our forestry harvests. Singing Waters operations, by this time next year, we should have a bathhouse there and 10 campsites. So that's just gonna cost more for us to operate. So we gotta have a little bit of money in there for that. Jerry's talked about putting in a revenue line item that offsets that, where we charge people for the campground. That's a policy discussion you guys can have. I don't have a problem adding it into the budget, but that's something that General Services Committee should discuss. Request $1,000 for new mapping software, which would be the same as what Candy's department just upgraded to in Esri software. Trail cameras, $700 so we can keep track of, issues like we heard about today. People going off the trails, upsetting landowners. If we, put some effort into some cameras, we can hopefully keep track of some of those problem areas and catch some of those people.
How are you gonna keep them from getting stolen?
I don't know,
I put a lock on them.
Yeah. You don't have constant supervision of them, if I have somebody a trail camera go to Mount and I know we need them.
Yeah.
Item good.
Well, you'd have to put them up high enough, they couldn't walk up to them and get them.
Yeah.
It'd have to be at a higher elevation,
With a lock.
pointing down.
You can buy those lock boxes, but I don't know how effective that is.
So-
One sledgehammer.
Modest amount, maybe just something that if we catch a couple people, maybe word will get out that, hey, we're watching, try to keep people a little more honest. New trailer, $15,000, 50% county, 50% trails fund, and we did put that in the,
Seems like a lot for a trailer.
I thought we had a trailer.
it's a trailer with a lift on it. It's so that they can move the mini excavator. Right now they borrow highways equipment every time they want to move their equipment. So if highway's heading north and we're heading south, it's a mess to try to move equipment around. So Jackie would like to be less dependent upon the highway schedule for where her crew goes. So that was the thought process.
Man, I bought a trailer that he's moving stuff. It's not big enough evidently to move it.
That sounds a little aluminum.
That was for
That's for-
lawnmowers and garbage,
Yeah.
what we did with that one.
This would have to be at least a 5-ton trailer for the
Yeah.
What do they want to put on it?
mini excavator, which got to weigh at least 8, probably 10.
Sometimes we have to wait for the low boy. I mean, it depends on what's available for the highway, and they just sort of like to have their own independence to move their own way. So, kind of two departments combined here for one total. Obviously, last year we said that trail maintenance was a 0% budget impact. It wasn't. We put in the budget as if it was, and it obviously wasn't. So we're trying to budget appropriately this year. This year, total trail $38,000. Total impact to the taxpayers, like I said, is $170,000 for Jackie's entire department. So not bad. We bring in enough revenue to keep that thing going for the most part.
Ryan, can you explain that zero on the trail maintenance? We
Yeah.
had about 4 people doing trail maintenance, I thought.
Yep.
For the summer.
And we just pretended like we were going to sell $170,000 worth of permits. So last year's budget, it said cost $170,000, permits $170,000. We didn't sell $170,000 of permits. We sold $120,000 permits. So this year, we're reflecting the actual cost.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I didn't catch that, okay. Thank you.
In the budget, it looked like it was neutral, but in reality, it never was.
No,
So let's just budget what we expect. I mean, that's a reasonable approach, I think.
thank you.
Yep. Real property, pretty easy department to budget here. Just a note, map sales continue to decline. We've got that great online interface. People just don't come in and ask for us to print maps as much
Do
anymore.
we
So,
advertise?
I don't know if we've ever
It
advertised.
wouldn't hurt, because I bet you a lot of people don't know that we can produce that, and they are really, they're really helpful.
There's a service in
These days,
town
you can
that's,
pull the GIS up on your computer and print them half out, do it yourself.
Yeah, but they can do a lot more with it.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. There's a service in town that's doing it now too. So I don't know about advertising because they already are a little angry that we kind of
Okay.
compete with them. So
Just a thought.
it's not much. We're talking penny revenue is hundreds of dollars, not thousands. And we're moving over to the Esri mapping services as well. So small increase in annual fees. Total cost of taxpayers for real property, $381,000, year-over-year change 2.3%. Board of Elections, budget down considerably. I meant to call Board of Elections this morning. My notes say we only have 2 elections next year. That can't be possible. We have to have more than that. But either way, we had 9 this year, so it's going to be less next year. Not a big presidential election year. No presidential primaries, so it's going to be less.
Well, some we fund and some of the towns and villages fund though too.
Right, some of them, yep. So the second year of our annual payment for the voting machines. So we did that in 2019. Paid the first payment 2020, second payment 2022 or 2021. Requests. There was a personnel compensation request that the department had made. I didn't fully fund that, but I did put in 2%. So the Board of Elections has 2%. All other county employees right now are at 0. I think that's fair. I do think that their scope of their work has changed, and we kind of excluded them from our whole employee compensation issue. So giving them a little bit of latitude is what I'm recommending, but it's still not a ton. Total budgeted cost of the taxpayers is going to be down quite a bit. Just, fewer elections, fewer inspectors, fewer ballots. It's just, where that department kind of fluctuates with operations. Veterans Affairs, we did decrease their state revenue a whopping $2,000 because they get $10,000 from the state. No other operational changes, requests from Steve. Total cost of the taxpayers up slightly to $57,341. Weights and Measures, also known as Consumer Affairs. This is a service that we contract with Jefferson County. Total cost next year is going to be $66,600. We used to have a department of 1 or 2 people, but now that's all with Jefferson. Planning Department, transportation bus system remains budget neutral. That's a good system that they've built up there in planning. It does not cost our local taxpayers any money. In fact, this year, we as a county, the federal government passed the big CARES Act, and Buffalo and Rochester and New York City all got a lot of big money. Lewis County got nothing. But what we did get was $1.2 million to offset lost revenue in our transportation system. So we did get a little bit of CARES funding, and so that's going to cover our ridership gaps this year, which will be about $600,000. And if our ridership gaps continue next year, it'll be another $600,000. So.
Did you cut the mass funding out for that mass camp over there at JCC?
Nope, that's still in. It's
Why is that in there?
$12,000. Something that we funded. It's a good program.
It doesn't support. It's not that program. Let BOCES fund it. They take all the credit for it. Let them fund it. That program doesn't serve very many people. I think only 13 last time.
What's the program?
What is the program?
It's a summer camp that we sponsor for students to get involved with math, science, and technology. Last year they did the greenhouse design, where they worked with engineering teachers at BOCES and JCC to design modern greenhouses. The year before, they did a design contest for windmills. The year before that, they did hydroponics, where they kind of studied and made models of how hydroponics would work. So the goal, I think, they started this 5 years ago probably, was to get more of our youth involved in science and technology to try to feed into our industries. We've done it for 5 years.
BOCES takes the credit for all.
What's it cost?
$12,000 is in the budget, but I don't think we've spent that much. It's typically less.
We pay a portion, we don't pay it all.
No, it's a partnership, yeah.
And that's for how many people for how long?
I think
For
a
the
week.
kids over the summer, I believe it is. It's a summer program.
Yeah.
So for the whole summer?
Full time.
No, it's not the whole summer. It's like a week or
And it's
two.
only-
A week.
2 weeks.
it's only
2 weeks,
certain
Michelle's
days.
saying.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
There's a lot better places in these communities need help than that. You just look at some of the communities and what they need help in, and it's not that. I mean, look at the fire departments around here, struggling, but we don't seem to fund them anything extra. We did last year by
Math,
2,000.
science, technology is absolutely critical to future economic development and the needs of manufacturing.
Well, let BOCES fund it, let IDA fund it. There you go.
Partnerships are good.
Well,
The IDA fund it then.
if we don't have general consensus, then we'll keep it in the budget, and you want to make a motion to take it out, we can do that.
Actually,
Okay.
I told you that before.
I know.
You know, I said that right from the very get-go. You just sit there and look at me like I got three heads.
Well, I don't take direction from one legislator, I take it from 10 legislators.
I
So
agree.
if 10 want it out, we'll take it out. $12,000 for community development projects. The reason that we increased that this year is because we always run short. We've got a community development line item that never seems to be quite enough for the projects that Greg's talking about. We always have towns and villages requesting assistance. Plus, Cassie wants to add an additional 12,000, which is in there to help towns and villages with their strategic plans. Many of our towns and villages have not updated the strategic plan, which means their land use planning is not updated. So one of the big things Cassie wants to do next year is try to push to work with our towns and villages to help them update their planning and making sure that we're making good strategic planning throughout the whole county.
What's Oak Hill Commission, the people belong to that's capable of doing it? Why be redundant?
The Tug Hill Commission will certainly for those in their service area, but we have half of our towns that are not in their service area probably, so.
But
Yeah.
they can join, can't they?
No.
No.
It only goes to the river and south. The north and the east are not part of the Tug Hill Commission. Planning total cost $262,000 this year, an increase of about 10%.
Brian,
Yeah.
there was talk last year with this downtown revitalization effort that was going on. We didn't get it, but the rumor mill was we got a better chance this year. Are we gonna have any costs associated with preparing that application, getting ready to go? or-
No, because the state discontinued the program this year.
Oh,
Well, they don't have any money, so. If they put the program together again, I will be first in line to apply.
but we
but-
won't need it.
Yeah. But things like that, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Things like that come up in the middle of the year, and we only have one well in the whole county, and it's this line item. So having that line item, with a little bit extra funding so we can do some of those things is good. Administrative departments, information technology. Again, we've got some turnover in employees, so we're saving a little bit there. Storage network, remember we're doing that in a two-phase project, 50,000 this year, 50,000 next year. Total IT impact on the county, 348,000. Total year-over-year change, 1%. Buildings and grounds, our state reimbursement for the courthouse, we're planning on that being less. I mean, why wouldn't? It's all other state revenue we're planning on less. Savings from solar, we're keeping that at 60,000. That's been a pretty decent estimate year over year. There was a request for an additional pickup truck for the staff at the JCC Education Center. We felt that wasn't necessary and didn't include it in the 2021 budget.
Oh, speaking of the JCC, since you got it popped up there, have they done anything with paying us for that dump truck and the other truck to do their big plan to do the CDL?
No.
So
They're-
why don't we put that up on the auction block then?
Because they still do want to do something with it, but the grant that they got from the state is on hold right now. So they are kind of, I mean, we've already replaced the equipment, so it's not like we need it. So we're kind of just hanging on to it in hopes that maybe that money will come through for them. The CDL program's been going great. We've got, we've put through a ton of road tests up there. So that aspect has been going well. But the equipment the funding they got for that was 50% from New York State. And so they're hopeful that when things calm down, maybe they can get it again, but I don't know. Building and grounds, capital, we talked about this already, the boiler replacement and the elevator controls, zero-turn lawn mower for capital equipment. Total buildings and grounds impact, $776,000, up 9.7%, largely due to the fact that this number last year was wrong. It should have been about $740,000. We had a mistake in the Schedule 5 that missed an employee somehow in the Excel spreadsheet. So it's not that they're up 10%, it's that we had a bit of a mistake last year.
And is there going to be some discussion on the zero-turn lawnmower, of course, of possibly farming that out?
Sure. If you want to have a discussion, I've asked Matt the first step, Greg had asked me to to see if we could bid out our lawn mowing, kind of like we do with some of our plowing contracts. I said the first step is we got to figure out how much it's currently costing us. So what's the point of bidding it out if we don't even know if it's less than what we have now? So I've asked Matt to pull that together, and if it's something we feel we could do cheaper, then that's.
Why buy the lawnmower until we find that number out?
We can do that. We can hold it. I mean, we don't. This budget's going to go into effect January 1st. We don't need the lawnmower until June, so we can do that bid before we buy the lawnmower. But we should put it in the budget just in case. I'm open to that. Who knows? We might save money. Let's see. Human resources, professional services. We are up a little bit in wages and fringes, but we are also increasing union negotiations. So what we did is we took $10,000 from Joan's budget. She had a line item called outside legal counsel. If we know we're going to use it for union, let's put it in HR where it belongs. So Caitlin's getting $10,000 in professional services. Joan's is going down $10,000, so it's neutral.
I know.
She's lucky that's all she lost. Total cost to the county for HR is $248,000, an increase of 10%, largely due to about half of that's because of the change we made with Joan's budget. County attorney, same thing. We're decreasing legal services, outside counsel, $10,000, so those offset. Revenue increased from DSS another $4,600. DSS funds 66%, 2/3 of the county attorney's budget. So just keep that in mind. County attorney total cost of the taxpayers $161,000, down 5.8 because we gave some to Caitlin. Treasurer revenue increased $15,000 for the 3+1 cash analysis. So Eric was saying our last year or this year we collected about $135,000 in revenue from interest. Well, interest rates have plummeted, so it's only going to be, we originally budgeted only $60,000, then we added a little bit for the 3+1 to bring it back up to $85,000. So we're kind of matching our estimate with what 3+1 thinks it's going to be. Interest and penalties, we knocked that down a little bit because interest rates are down a little bit. That's when people are late on their taxes. We charge them interest, but we're not going to charge them more than the market rate. Personnel decrease is down 10% due to employee turnover and attrition. Treasurer total, again, Treasurer's department that brings in more than they spend. Total revenue in this year is $321,000. Obviously, that's less, but that's mostly due to our investments. So, county manager, most important department of all. Wages and fringes are up $6,000 due to the new contract, and county manager miscellaneous is a new line item. This is especially apparent during the pandemic. We're managing a lot of things. People come and we make decisions and we spend money, and then poor Cassandra and Kayla have to scrounge and knock down department heads to try to find where we're going to pay for it. And it's silly things like signage for the courthouse. Got to get it tomorrow. I mean, there's just things that come up that we're constantly fighting with where we're going to spend it from. I made the decision. I ordered it. I should have a little bit of leeway to manage some of those things. So that's why we added a $5,000. What's that?
It's a bit high for you. There's a lot of pizzas coming in the door.
Well, anything's better than zero. So that's why we added that this year. Total county manager costs $140,000, up about 8% between the two items we just talked about. Clerk of the board, no operational changes, no requests. Total cost to the county $132,000, down 8.6% because Terry was here for about 40 years, and it's just cheaper when you get newer people. Legislative, this is your guys, the legislators' expenses. Contingency is going to stay at 100. Okay, that's the same special legislative contingency we've had in the past. Legislator travel reduced by $5,000. We just haven't used it. We've had, how much did we say in the budget this morning for legislative travel? It was like $15,000, and we've never even come close to using that. So we knocked that down. Contingency, this is our regular contingency, will stay at 200,000. This is not under the legislative section of the budget, but I always present it here. It kind of goes with your guys' discretion. So that's going to stay at 200,000. Like I said, it's in the non-departmental category. It's not necessarily under your budget. Requests, increase legislator salary by $1,500 is funded in the draft budget. Your salaries have not been increased since the year 2000. And before you say anything, let's take a look at the numbers. Lewis County, lowest in New York State at $8,500 a year for legislator salary. Our peer counties are St. Lawrence at $12,000. They increased theirs for the first time a few years ago. Oswego's at $13,000, Jefferson's at $15,000, Oneida is at $16,000, so that's what our surrounding counties are looking like. Steuben County, I always think, is a decent comparison to us, similar population, similar rural. Yates didn't report, so I don't have their numbers. You know, we are the lowest in the state, and I'm proposing that we go from lowest to 5th lowest. So we're not really breaking the bank here. Here is what your salary would have done if you would have just taken 2% cost of living increases over the last 20 years. You'd be at 12.8, which would put you right about in the middle of the pack. So I'm going to keep this in. I think it's the right thing to do. You guys never will vote yourselves a raise, so I'm going to put it in, and if you want to take it out, you can. But
I think you gotta go to Clinton.
Show Creek County is looking pretty good.
Or you can go up to Schoharie level if you want.
I didn't think we could do it this year. I thought you had to do it on a year when we all ran for re-election.
No, you can do it as long as it's in the budget.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we looked at it,
Yeah, no.
Wow, Clinton.
There's perception out there.
yeah.
Clinton is pretty good. So anyway, that's the
And it's
logic
better that you
behind it.
don't vote the year that you're running to give yourself.
St. Lawrence also gets health care with theirs.
That's right. Yep, you're right. Yep. Legislative total cost, $250,000. I'll note that that costs more for you guys than it costs for me. And total increase
Kind of
of...
us.
Yeah, would you like to divide yours by 10?
40, that's
A lot
right.
of
Be
pizza.
adjusted pretty quick.
4.3% total increase. Non-departmental spending, everything's remaining the same except for some that I've highlighted. New addition, hand in hand this year, requested actually 16,000. I put in the wrong number there. They requested 16,000. I'm suggesting that we put in 10. They're a community organization, a not-for-profit. It became extremely apparent the value of a local not-for-profit daycare in Lewis County during the pandemic. The hospital in particular was desperate for childcare so that their essential workers could stay on the job. And this organization has struggled through the pandemic with revenue. They've struggled keeping costs down for families in Lewis County. And I think it's as worthy as any of the other things that we fund to chip in and give them a little bit. So that's the argument to add them this year.
That, you're describing a special situation.
Mm-hmm.
So is that gonna stay in the budget year after year after year, in your opinion?
Typically, once organizations are in, it's hard to get them out.
That's right, but you described a special situation for that need,
Yeah.
and that special situation might not continue.
Phil, I think that's a great question, and I'm looking at the list thinking of other similar ones. You know, museums are more of a community function. If you look at ANCA, if you look at Advocate Drum, those are economic development types of things, which I think hand in hand fits in the same mold. Daycare is just critical to employment. So it's a good question. Think about what do they compare to, and does it make sense to keep them in or not?
Well, daycare in hand is a Loudville-centric thing. It doesn't help West Leiden, I doubt, and it doesn't help Diana, I doubt.
Depends.
Or Copenhagen.
Depends.
They do have satellite locations, I think.
Depends. You have hospital employees that live there in Diana, that bring their children into hand in hand?
If you did a
You know, I'm just asking.
zip code search of where the county employees are from, you wouldn't find too many outside of 10 miles radius. Which is just the way it is.
Right,
You
but I
know,
mean,
that's the
even
way
one-
it is. And
Even
that's
if only
okay.
one person from Diana was helped by that, it's still, you know.
One person
Yeah, there's a lot of
compared
them.
to how many?
I mean, it's a daycare, it's hard to find.
You love to spend money, don't you?
Absolutely, especially if it's coming out of Diana.
Oh, we do like those Bonaparte
You got-
taxes.
You got a historical museum up there getting a grant.
There's all of them, Ryan.
Yeah.
No, there's another page.
I was gonna say, I looked.
There is, I believe, satellite locations for Hand in Hand. One, I believe, is in Port Lyden. I'm not positive about that. Jenny, can you give me a nod or?
They run school-age childcare programs, I think on South Louis. The BATS program runs across the street at South Louis, so there's another one. They were running in Harrisville, school-age childcare programs. But, safe and affordable childcare is a critical part of our infrastructure, as Eric talked about on the economy. When we're seeing people in our one-stop or even through our child protection services, we have the unfortunate opportunity to have to investigate illegal childcare in Lewis County through DSS. And, we don't have a problem with a licensed center. They follow the rules and the regulations. But these one-offs in people's homes and in the basements are the ones that where kids are getting hurt. So I think I would just like to point that out from a child development standpoint, that, a regulated child care center is very centric to making sure our children are safe.
Eric and I sat down with the chairwoman of the board and the executive director of Hand in Hand. They've made attempts to expand into Croghan and Harrisville, and the numbers haven't been there. So I think they would like to expand their footprint, but I learned a lot about healthcare or about childcare in this meeting. It's expensive. It's just expensive. So anyhow. Lewis County IDA, we bumped them up slightly to around even $190,000 of support. Lewis County Development Corporation is a new one that we added, the LCDC, that's at $30,000. We're going to ask the LCDC to take on more property cleanup projects. It's something that this board has pushed for. And if we do that, like the project in Turin, for example, we've been working on, we got to give these guys the administrative support. They have audits every year to pay for. There's just 99% of their budget is what comes in goes out in terms of grant management, but there are administrative costs. And so supporting those so that operation and that function can continue in Lewis County is an important thing.
I think you ought to kick the 10 you put in IDA to the development court. Give them 40 instead.
Well,
that is a major concern here in Lewis County.
Yeah.
You drive down these roads and see these structures that are ready to fall in the road.
And I think the board has been clear that they want the county to take more action on some of these properties. And if we're going to do that, we need an arm, to do it through. And typically that's been the LCDC. Lewis County Railroad Society, I'm bumping them down to 0. They requested 10, but they continue to be a roadblock to progress, in my opinion. We're trying to do more recreation with the railroads, and they continue to just want to develop them for, I don't know, the next railroad museum that's going to come through. And
It's a private enterprise right now. One individual has control over all the rail lines and stuff.
Yes. So it's not much.
I agree with the 0, thank you.
It's not much, but it's a little statement that we have a different vision of what we want to do than them. So.
How much of the IDA's budget do we fund?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Eric, do you know?
Just a rough estimate. I won't look into it.
Rough estimate, 250,000, 300,000 annual budget. This is a completely new approach, and there was no funding until 2 years ago. So.
Where did they get their funding? Was it from wind revenue and things like that?
They get funding for projects that come through to a final pilot, and they get funded by pilot, which are many fewer than they used to be 20 years ago.
So this also, it doesn't just go to the IDA per se, it also is for the whole economic development up there. That's our Naturally Lewis brand. That's, you know, all the activities that they do that are outside just the IDA.
I know that's one of the things we talked about is being more aggressive with advertising, with potential for people moving up to Lewis County and, you know, remote workers and that kind of
This
thing.
isn't actually a lot more than what used to be in our budget because we used to have a whole economic development department that had costs of about $150,000. So it's not a whole lot different.
And we gave them a whole bunch of money though too, you know, for years. You know,
We funded
so
with direct-
They've been funded fairly well over the years that
I
I've
agree.
been on this board.
Well, I agree.
So, if you kick, I'd still say I'd like to see that kick down to the LCDC. They can, they're fine, they should be able to handle 180. You know, as long as they don't keep losing. I don't know what they're gonna do when, you know that Kraft is sold the string division, right?
Yep.
You know those, a lot of employees are probably gonna be
Switched, yes.
switched or gone.
Well, what we're hearing and hopefully is not gone, but
My kids are working
switched.
12 hours a day, they have 6 days a week. Other people do not want to work, is what the problem is. They cannot find workers.
When they retire, they'll be wealthy.
It does, if they can live that way.
Dick, did you have a question?
Jeff, can you go back one slide? You had, okay, you got double plays up there with 20. Did they give you an idea what they're gonna do with that? Usually they come in with a presentation.
They have a letter that they sent asking for funding requests. I can share that with you, but we haven't done much beyond that, just a letter.
Okay.
They had a rough year, I know that, their
Well, that's
revenue's
what
way
I was
down.
gonna say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was well worth doing. I just wondered if they gave us the lowdown.
All I have is a letter, and I mean, I've had informal conversations with Dan, because I go to the gym and I talk to him, believe it or not, Ron.
I'm just gonna tell you,
I
I
know
can't
you
when I look at it.
I know.
They move around and cover quite a bit of the county too.
Yes.
Okay.
So, that's how we are with non-departmental capital. We talked about this before, but I just wanted to point out something else. We had originally said we were going to fund that capital building project line at $400,000. Well, we took, you know, we're talking about a 1.4% tax increase. Part of that is going into here. So we're bumping that line up even more. It really is a placeholder for a future bond. So whatever we decide to do with the DSS building, we can't, you know, just kick that down the road forever. This line will be built into our budget. It will be funded so that if we do have a bond, whether it's 2021 or 2025, that money's there. And every year we don't use it, it's just going to go into fund balance, which is good because that can be put towards a down payment or whatever else we want. But the money's there, so, you know, when we're ready to do something, we're able to pay for it. Review our fiscal targets. We've hit all 3 in this year's budget, which is good. The last thing I want to talk about is our tax increase. So this is what I've put together, which is a 1.38% tax increase. What I want to show you is 3 options that I hope you guys talk about and give us some feedback, because, you know, we will adjust the budget kind of accordingly. 1.3% is what I'm suggesting. However, for $241,000 of fund balance, and I'll remind you that we have $16 million in fund balance, we can do a 0% tax increase. But don't forget 2 things. 1, we're not really paying the full IGT amount this year. If we were, and it were back up to 3.5 million or 3.7 million, it wouldn't be so easy for us to get to this level. We put together a pretty easy budget because we've got the give coming from the IGT. We expect that to be back next year. So if you do 0 this year, what does next year look like with the IGT? Meaning, if we don't do anything, will we have to do a 3% or more next year? Okay? The second thing is, if we do this, we don't know what the economy looks like next year. We don't know where sales tax is going to be. The reason, even though Eric and I could have pretty easily presented you guys a 0% budget, we could have. In fact, we did. We balanced it, and then we went back. Because I think we should take a little bit this year, because it's better to take a little bit than to have to, next year, take a lot because we didn't take a little bit when we could have. So I'm saying it's more palatable to the taxpayers to have 1.3 this year, 1.3 next year, rather than having to come to them 2 or 3 years down the line once we've built up a big budget gap. But if, we are in a position with our fund balance that we could easily cover that last $241,000 and do a 0 budget. So I would hope that we'd have some good discussion on that. And then the third one I highlighted here is the tax cap. So we could take up to 2%, which would be $108,000 that would be added to our fund balance. So rather than doing a 0% and subtracting, we could do 2% and add. So with that, I do want to have some discussion. How is everybody feeling about the 1.3% tax increase? Knowing this, how do we feel about it? General fund balance, 16 million is high. It's very high. It's a good problem to have, but we need to talk about what's the plan. The third thing is the capital building account. I don't think there's many counties in New York State that are setting aside, as a proportion of our budget, 4.24% for a project that doesn't exist. So just as a discussion item, we're putting aside money in the budget, which I think is a good thing, but maybe you guys feel it could be used elsewhere, is what I'm saying. So 3 things. Tax rate, how is everybody feeling? Just to make sure we're on the same page so that when you get that budget on your desk on November 2nd, it's not a surprise. It's kind of something that we all are on the same page about.
But I have one question. Fund balance.
Yeah.
For one, we were supposed to pay down the $900,000 so much each year to get off of that. We don't have anything in the budget. Why are we ignoring that? And then if we do a 0% tax increase, we're at $1 million something per year.
Yes.
So if we turn around and have problems, that fund balance, I don't care what we have in there, it's not going to take many years. Or one hellacious tax increase.
Yep.
So I guess my first question is, why aren't we addressing the fund balance like we talked about previous, putting something against it?
So we're using part of that fund balance to pay for the IGT. So the reason why we've kept it at $1.6 million is because our IGT continues to go like this. Some years it's up, some years it's down. It's really such a large budget item that it can wag our budget one way or the other. So by using that fund balance and keeping it in there, it keeps our budget consistent without doing, like you said, hellacious increases up. So one year our rate would be 8.2, dollars per 1,000, and then the next year it's down to 5.4. So by keeping that fund balance in there, it's like a ballast in a ship. It helps us coast through the ups and downs of the IGT payment.
But even if we don't have it, we have it. You say $16 million fund balance,
Yep.
at a certain date in the budget, you just take it out of there so it doesn't change it.
It's the same thing, right?
So, I guess the question is, that's my concern, and then we're wanting to increase it even more. So I'm speaking, if we don't correct some of that, I can't support doing a 0% increase. That's just me.
So, to be clear, I'm recommending that we do take a little bit, but I'm saying we could do it differently if you guys feel it could be.
It's very prudent to do a 1.38% increase, in my opinion. I know of a personally of a situation that an entity did not want to have tax increases and didn't for several years by using fund balance. All of a sudden, the fund balance was gone and the taxes went up 50%, and it was a high rate to begin with. So going up 1.38% is probably expected by the taxpayers and would be prudent for us to do that to avoid a critical situation later, in my opinion.
The other option is, you can have your cake and eat it too, where We just reduce, I mean, this is money that we're setting aside for a future thing that doesn't exist. So if you want to make up that $241,000, it's right there. So we could do a zero, but we're trying to set some money aside for the future.
And just,
And the same token, a lot, you went with our neighbor counties as far as the legislators' salaries, et cetera. I've been reading a lot about our neighbor counties reducing the tax rates next year in their proposed budget.
St. Lawrence is down.
So that perception, so is another couple of counties. So with that perception being said, I cannot support a 1.38% tax increase.
I know you talked early on about how we're not putting enough money towards our capital investments and our buildings and things like that. So I think transferring money out for a future project it sounds prudent to me.
What are our capital projects? You had that slide, capital projects.
So we've got $875,000 in buildings and grounds projects. We're going to put in from the taxpayers $500 and use $375,000 of fund balance. So, you know, we're not putting it all on the taxpayers. We have saved a little bit ahead of time, so we're doing that. Equipment is $500,000, and most of that is just our fleet budget. Enterprise is like $370,000.
The only project we really have going next year is the boiler, right?
Yes. Yeah, yep, the boiler and the elevator controls, which, you know, whoop-de-doo. And then, you know, this amount here. Road striping, but that's, look at 75 in, 75 out. You know, that's what we do every year. And then data processing, we're finishing that storage, you know, storage.
That 448,000 is also kind of like a little cushion in case something happens.
True. And we have cushion.
Dramatic.
And we have cushion because, you know, we already have fund balance for capital of 2.6 million, or, you know, 2 million. So we kind of have cushion already. But the point of this is it's a placeholder. So when we finally decide what you want to do and we want to bond out funds, we know for a fact that we can afford it because we've already been affording it for the last 2 or 3 years. It's a luxury item. It's a luxury to have a placeholder for a project that doesn't exist. We need to do a project. Either you get a bond and put it in here, or you take this money and put it in DSS. But we can't go on forever doing neither. Right. So that's why we're trying to, you know, be prudent by having that available, like Ian and Phil said.
I thought we had some projects for 2021 that was identified. I thought we were gonna, if we had the boiler,
Yeah.
I thought we were gonna do something at the county highway with the garage.
It's already done.
That's
That's
all
already
done.
budgeted.
Okay, that went.
Windows look nice.
Yeah. Did that this
The
year.
windows look nice on
I
it.
do, yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty more we could do. It's just a matter of, you know, I mean, if you want me to come up with 448,000 more for projects, we could.
No, I just was thinking there was some other stuff out there that was not here, though, right?
Right, yeah. I guess my point was, we certainly have places to spend it if we need. It's just, we're kind of at that point where either, same argument we've been having, you know, for 15 years. Either you fix what you have at DSS or you build new. And we're not gonna fix what we have if the plan is to tear it down and start over. Could we spend money on the HVAC at DSS? Absolutely. Why would we do that if we're gonna tear it down? So that's, you know, we just get to that inflection point time and time again.
So here's another thought. You know, we had the ad hoc committee going forward with capital projects and trying to make a decision on DSS, whether we were going to rehab that one or if we're going to build a new building. You know, I think it's probably time that we regroup that ad hoc committee and make a decision on what we're going to do for big capital projects next year. Whether, you know, we're going to rehab DSS or exactly where we're going to go with that. What this slide here shows that at $450,000 already a year in a capital building fund, that we could probably actually do all the work that we wanted to do, the DSS building, a highway garage, bond it and fund it with that $450,000 a year that we've been doing historically. So there's an option too.
To Randy's point, there is another place to get money. We know that our IGT, we put in $3 million. We now know as of like the last 48 hours that it's only going to be like 2.4 million, 2.2 million. So that's, you know, 600,000. But my fear with that is you drop it down one year, next year we're going to be sitting here doing the exact same thing, figuring out how we get it back up.
Do you ever know that from year to year anyways?
No, we don't.
There you go.
But it could be 5 million next
Sure
year.
it could. Sure it could.
Well,
I'm just saying, I cannot support any tax increase this year, if I'm still a legislator when we vote. And I probably won't be, so I pride myself on never increasing taxes maliciously to the taxpayers in my district. And you've already decided you're going to take $1,000 away from an entity in my district, which is bullshit. That should be put back in. But that's not the time or place. I don't think that the reasoning is right just because you have a personal vendetta against an individual, and this board does. I don't. I have to protect the people in my district, but I also, like I said, I will not support any tax increase whatsoever. We're sitting on a $16 million fund balance.
Well, and I think that's the conversation I wanted to have with you guys. Is we do have quite a bit of money right now, so you know, how do you want to handle it?
The flip side of that is if you don't do any increase at all, inflation and what have you will put you the other way. So, you know, it's not totally prudent as a governing body like we are to not have some little tax increase as you go along. Everybody likes to say no tax increase, but if you don't, it comes around to bite you.
Well, Dick, I've heard a lot of conversation here today about take. I haven't heard a hell of a lot of give. With regards to the budget, I haven't heard a lot of give back. I've heard a lot of take from the taxpayers. I haven't heard a lot of places where we legitimately are going to try to cut back any more expenses.
Well, the
Is there
reason
a lot
that
in there that I missed? Did I miss something? Please educate me.
a little bit, you're just, this is the point I would make. The burden on the taxpayers has increased. So what I'm showing you guys with these slides that show cost to the taxpayers, for example, the reason that you're seeing that go up more is because in a lot of instances, the state support on the revenue side is less. It's not that our expenses are going up, it's that our revenues are going down. So I agree, that's not yes, it's more burden on them, but I don't think it's a result of necessarily runaway spending. I think it's a result of our revenues being cut that we can't control. I mean, are there areas where we've increased? Yes. No doubt.
There is. There are a lot of places you've increased.
Randy, the item that you brought up, I'm having trouble identifying it. What was that all about?
What's that?
The item you brought up about
Trains.
$1,000 from someplace.
That's the trains.
The Railroad Museum in Kroger.
Yeah,
No, I mean, why are we taking it away from them?
because they don't own any of the railroad and they can't do a dang thing with them. It's all been sold out to another entity.
A lot of these other entities are the same way, Dick, so.
I don't think they're private industry for most of the other ones. I think they provide a service to the whole
I'm
community.
just saying, I have to fight for my district.
No
If I
problem with
don't,
that.
then why did I get elected? If I
didn't
cannot
understand
fight
what
for
you
my
were saying.
district, it'll go through 9-1, I'm sure, or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm just voicing my concerns with regards to this, and I answered your question.
Yeah, I didn't understand.
And I disagree with just flat out taking a small little entity like the Railroad Museum in Krogan and penalize them $1,000. You know, it is what it is. You know, if we minimalize $12,000 for this mass program,
Yeah, there you go.
why can't we minimalize $1,000 for the Railroad Museum?
Make a motion when we get to it, and second. and see where it goes.
If I'm still on the board, I will.
I got two questions to ask. I mean, one of them you got in revenues for future building projects. But now maybe I'm confused. Hasn't that, because once you've been driving our $800,000, didn't we agree previously to funds $400,000 a year to make some of these projects happen?
I lost you, Jerry.
Well, we didn't have enough money to complete HABC
Right.
last year. If it's 800,000, we only put 300 or 400,000 in there.
We didn't budget that last year. Last year?
We budgeted, we should be up to $800,000 now. That line item says 800,000. Way back, that's to do the project, because we didn't have enough money to do it before, because we were only at some range. But we funded it last year, and we ended up with 400,000.
I'm almost certain the PSP boiler was not in the capital budget last year.
Well, maybe you changed it from capital budget. We put money in the budget to make some of this stuff happen.
And we did. We did the highway, we did the,
$400,000, and
Yeah.
we haven't spent it.
no, we
And
did spend
put
it.
another 400,000, and we're calling that a building fund.
We did spend it. We did the fuel system, we did the siding, we did the repointing. We did spend it.
No, that was out of a capital project.
Right. At the, what do you-
Max, okay, but we also put, and.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You put it right, you're right. I got you, Jerry.
$400,000 in
Yes,
2 years.
you did it right here. You know, you did it 1 year. You consolidated the funds last year, and you put $410,000
Last year's budget.
in this new fund. Yeah, right here.
Okay,
Right.
so to give us 800,000
You
in
do.
budget time this year.
Yeah, you got it. Look
So
at it.
that's not a building account, really. We say we're doing that. That is just to take care of the stuff we need to take care of. Now, when we get our other projects done, that may be rolled over into the whatchamacallit. I think we're looking at it wrong, like we're increasing it again. That's what was already in the budget last year. So
This
it's
wasn't
not
in,
increasing
this
the
wasn't
budget.
raised, no, this wasn't raised by taxpayers last year. This was the consolidation of closing other funds and putting them into one new fund. And then we took our excess sales tax and some other extra money and put it in there to start this new fund.
That's right.
And if you look, we did 400.
This year, we're carrying this.
And exactly, so now we did 410 last year. I'm recommending 448 this year, which means at the end of December 2021, 1 year from now, we should have 858 in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's enough to take care. It's not per se this coming year building projects. It's been spoke for when we do the HABC.
No, the HVAC is being paid for out of this line item here.
Separate line item.
This is totally unaccounted
Where
for.
did that come from?
This, we've always had this line item. It's buildings and grounds capital.
Oh, well, I'm totally confused because we put away for that specific project or projects like it.
Projects like it, sure, yeah.
So the thing is, we haven't put any more in there this year. So
No.
how are we gonna do an $800,000 project? There's only 500 in there.
There's currently 392, there's currently 392. We're adding 500 in the budget from the taxpayers, and that gives us enough to pay for the 875 in projects, which is the boiler and the elevator
And singing.
and Singing Waters. Yep, thank you, Phil. And that means at the end of next year, we'll have $17,000 left in that account. But we'll have done a big project, so I feel okay with that.
Okay, we're roughly on the same page. But we're trying to complete stuff that needs to be done, okay?
Yep.
Whether we keep two separate accounts or not.
Yeah,
But the thing is, once we make decisions on stuff, there's gonna be other stuff that's gonna fall in place that needs maintenance. Whether
And-
it's DSS and.
yeah. And that's why we need to be very judicious about our capital plan, our 5-year plan. Department heads need to keep track of what needs maintenance, and we need to make sure it's in here, and then we make sure we fund it in the year that it needs to be done.
But that money that we're raising now will not be dumped in out of some other fund. So in other words, we're raising it for our ongoing projects, whatever they are. That could total on 30 years, I think.
Sure.
What, 15 million? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm right with you, yeah. That's the point. That's the point of this.
So that's gonna take care of everything as far as building new additions and doing the maintenance.
Depending on what you choose. I mean, that might not be enough for everything, but it's a good start.
Right, okay. I'm just totally confused.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Pretty much. But I do know what he's got in the budget will be whatever if we do additional projects, that's where the money will come from to do those renovations.
That's exactly what I'm saying, yes.
So, too.
And it may have to increase as we get into and stuff like that, but that's maintaining.
Or you're gonna bond, so you have that money to pay for the bond, if you have a lot of things you're gonna do.
Well, yeah, but if we do.
Yeah.
This one?
So if we hit it down the middle,
I don't think we're gonna have that money for a
22.
while.
Unless you
97,000.
bond.
Does that make sense?
Well,
Depending on what we do.
No.
Right.
yeah, if we decide to bond it, then we would probably cash flow
Do
the
everything at
bond,
once.
the bond anticipation note with the excess fund balance.
But we gotta figure out.
There's no need for us to carry a $16 million fund balance.
Right.
Even Patty is the most conservative woman I've ever worked with. She would not say we need to carry a $16 million fund balance.
Okay,
So-
I'm satisfied.
Yeah, just looking at it and listening to Greg here, I think that to split the difference there, the 7 million, the 0.82 would be reasonable. We use a little bit of our fund balance, which everybody's discussion now, we're way over what we need. I think the general consensus from what everybody's heard, at least what I've heard, is, oh my God, the state's cutting 20% and everything's terrible and what's gonna happen and how bad is it gonna be, and 0.82% isn't very bad. We keep our money going into our capital projects because we know at some point we've either got maintenance or building or additions or renovations or something. I agree wholeheartedly with Larry. I think we got to get that ad hoc committee together again to revitalize that whole discussion. Yeah, do a little bit of both. A little bit of a tax increase and a little bit of 16 million we got. And whether the $1,000 goes back in for the Railroad Museum, that's,
something too.
$1,000 is minor.
You take it out of mass camp.
Well, that money stays.
I'll find a place for it.
Does anybody know when we had a zero budget?
Last year?
Yeah. We did? I didn't remember that.
So for the Railroad Museum, if we give them their 1,000, it stays in the museum.
Yes. Just to explain the Railroad Museum, I wouldn't describe it as a personal vendetta. We have a vision for what we'd like to do with the Rails to Trails in Lewis County, and there's a lot of recreational opportunities that could happen with those trails. There's been one group who has opposed that and has worked very closely with the railroad companies to keep them from converting to rails. So that was the reason. But you know what, when you put it that way, it's a community organization, it's a nice museum, we probably don't need to be taking it out on them.
In reality,
Isn't the museum a nonprofit?
Yeah.
if it stays with the museum, I got no problem with it. If it goes over to
yeah.
Trottier, I got a problem with
It
it.
doesn't.
Well,
Well, not only that, we
I'd like
could
to
put
hear.
something in the agreement where they have to use it to,
yeah.
specifically for the
And
museum.
bluntly put, it's gonna cost them tens of thousands of dollars to get these roads open back up so they could run a damn train across it. They're all covered with blacktop now.
Right.
But let's be honest, it's never gonna happen because they're not gonna be able to come up with the finances to make it happen.
Most likely not,
We've
so
been
they-
in this 16 years.
It's got nothing to do with the museum as far as I can see. But I agree with you, the museum should have their
A little
$1,000.
bit of a philosophical thing. I think if they could kind of split their mindset to operate the museum and give up some of their desires on the corridors, and I think they won't give up their desires in the corridors because of one individual who happens to be the chair of the nonprofit. So,
We could say that about anything we fund, okay? This is only $1,000 we're talking about.
Andrea's
I mean,
right.
it's not like we're talking a ton of money, and if kids can go there at that museum and get something out of it, of our past, what the heck is wrong with that?
I agree. I think we should put it back in. I agree.
I mean,
You whipped him.
It was a little, well, it was
You don't agree, you're just throwing in the towel.
well, for 0.000000001% of our budget, I'm willing to change my mind.
I've worked with kids my whole
We
life.
spent $1,000.
I agree with that, Bill. I agree with that.
So
Stomach thinks my throat's been cut.
Yes, I agree.
Okay,
All right.
we'll handle it.
50,000, give it back.
Take it from
There we go. The first use, there we go, Randy. The first use of my $5,000 miscellaneous is gonna be to restore this.
Take 1,000 from IDA and give it to the railroad. I don't care how you do it.
Yeah, we'll take care.
Places, there's places for it.
We'll do it, we'll do it. So.
You know, I
I've-
drove bus for years, and where did we take kids? Constableville Hall, places like the museum. Yeah, right now they're not doing it, but they might have a chance to do it again.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrea. I do.
I think we have to look out for our kids. They are our future.
Yep, I agree 100%. So, we've heard a couple proposals. Keep it at 0, go halfway, keep it where it is. I mean, at the end of the day, I can present something that doesn't have consensus, but the reason why we do this is to try to get everybody on the same page so that when we get the budget, it's kind of, everyone feels good about it. It's not contentious. So.
Who's doing that? Are you doing that?
Me.
I'm gonna take this.
I'm
Just so I
okay.
understand the
Personally, I'm
difference.
okay with the 1.38%, but if the majority wants to drop back to 0.82, I can live with
With the
that.
hard times.
Ryan, the
I don't
difference is you're
feel that-
suggesting the top three numbers, the 0.82 and then the 1.38. You're talking about not a change to our spending, but our change to the fund balance.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could, that's the other thing, is there's two pots that,
Yeah.
two ways to skin the cat. Increase fund balance or decrease spending. The two locations where you could decrease spending would be the money that we set aside for a project that doesn't exist, or from an IGT that we're not going to pay. We're almost certain that it's not going to be 3 million. It's going to be less. So if you want to make our budget 2.9 million for IGT instead of 3 and do a 0 tax, you're pretty much there. So.
Ryan, I think you're using that for a project that doesn't exist. I think you should phrase it for a project that doesn't have a name.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. You're right.
We haven't named them yet.
Yep, you're right.
There's gonna
It's a
be a
good-
project at some point.
Oh, yeah, unexpected one.
Yep, you're right.
Okay.
Good point, Dick. Yep. A future project to be named.
I think that we need to thank Brian and the managers that put this together, because I was a little nervous not having seen this. I'm kind of a hands-on, I wanted to see more. Bill, you remember, we used to sit here afternoon after afternoon, so I think you've done an honorable job in putting this together. I'm sure we all thank all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Remember, the $1,000 goes.
Remember the 12,000, pull it
Get
out.
out of here with no feathers.
I agree with Dick. I think you did a great job, and I also agree with Greg. I'd like to get a paper copy.
Yep, we'll get you the paper, yep, absolutely. To something Randy said earlier about some of the counties reducing their rates. I've talked around a little bit. It's two different philosophies. St. Lawrence County, nothing against this, not negative to them. They're doing a budget that doesn't assume $1 of state cuts. That's not the budget that we put together. And I personally, my philosophy is we should prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Madison County is another one I talked to last week. They're doing their budget without assuming state cuts. I could give you a budget right now that'll reduce taxes because we have had such good momentum with our tax base growing. But we can't, it'd be harder to do both do the cuts and reduce, you know what I'm saying?
But the public perception, they're
Is
not
that-
telling the public what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Yeah.
They're taking the high road and taking all the pats on the back and making it look wonderful, and then next year, when the shit hits the fans, now they're gonna have to answer to it down the road.
Yes.
Right.
And that's one thing that I appreciate you avoiding.
Yeah. Well, I think
It just makes
that,
our lives a whole lot easier.
yeah. I
But
mean,
I'm still gonna vote against any tax increase. just so you
That's
guys
fair.
are all aware of that.
well,
If I'm still
okay,
on
just
the
to be
board.
clear, that hasn't changed from you in 3 years, so
Day
what
one.
difference
Day
does
one,
it
I'll
make?
never vote for a tax increase.
Let me call your attorney, see if we can move that date up.
Which one of the four you want names on, Joe?
Yeah.
So I would
I got an
say,
idea. Who do we write the check on?
Me personally, I'll see to it it gets there.
I would say at this point, we have 2 weeks until November 2nd. I think Eric and I have enough feedback that we can come back with maybe something that's a little bit in the middle. Would that be
Yes.
okay for everybody?
7.51 or something, or 2.
Yeah, we can find something that works
Well, if you
there.
total 12,000.
You might even be able to get it down to a 0.50 or something.
One.
Start looking at that.
So we'll come back. You will get. I'll send you my PowerPoint, and we can even print it off for you, so you've got it paper. But the full budget, the bound budget that is the draft, the tentative, will be on your desk on November 2nd.
Are you gonna hand deliver mine?
I will hand deliver it for you. Angie.
Okay, I won't forget.
Well, it'll be hand delivered right to that
How
spot.
many
I won't
pages is
be-
this presentation?
92.
You're gonna hand
This
deliver it
PowerPoint
to
that you just went through was 92 pages?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's why I didn't print.
Yeah, no. Yeah, wow.
It'll be at Pine Grove Fire.
Okay.
I'm not gonna be here.
Rode hard and put up wet.
I'm in my neighbor's.
You look at
Well, we'll come get you.
Oh, yeah, right.
I can trust you.
Yeah,
So-
right.
November 2nd, the final draft will be out. It'll go to you guys. You can make any, after that, can I say one final thing before we kind of wrap up here? The November 2nd budget, once it comes from me and Eric, we're done. We have nothing else to say. Any changes after that, if you feel this tax rate should be different, if you feel different line items should be changed, just work amongst yourselves and come to a consensus with how to fix it. So that's how the system is supposed to work. The budget officer presents something, then it's in the hand of the elected officials to do with it what you want. So-
You're on record as saying you're not gonna say anything else. You
No.
just said that, right?
I won't say anything else.
He's spoke for himself, though.
Well, you're elected,
through
the
you.
treasurer is elected, so
Okay.
he can say what he wants. So November 2nd, it's all in your hands. So that's all I'll say. Anything else? Well, I'll take a round of applause. No, I'm
Just
kidding.
just so you remember, Rick Finn is available.
Yeah.
Are you applying, Greg?
Oh, yeah, that's just what I want.
We still got an executive session. to go
Yeah.
to.
Oh, yeah, we do.
So you
I
wanna
move we
take
go
5
into
minutes?
executive session.
I'll second it.
Yeah.